Bro, where are we? Didn't you read the title? We're in Brazil.
'Cause it looks like we're in some dude's bathroom.
I'm pretty sure we're in Brazil. Ah! Oh, it's just a fake giant cat. Ah, shit. So why are we in Brazil? Let me go swim over to that office chair and I'll explain it to you. I'm dedicated to this bit. So what were they or we doing in Brazil? Well, to understand that, we have to take a look at some military war strategies and some political alliances, and then we get to talk about these pictures and how they're somewhat connected. But first, if you are not from the land of crazed college sports or tipping culture, or if you just slept through a push, sorry, Mr. White, I'm going to attempt to give you the fastest crash course on the American Civil War on the internet. Basically, the southern states relied heavily on enslaved people as labor in agriculture and thereby their economy. The new president-elect, Mr. Beardman, and his party held a platform that would restrict the growth of slavery. This upset the South government. People in new territories would not be allowed to own slaves. Fearing an end to the institution of slavery before Lincoln had even been inaugurated, 7 states had seceded from the United States, forming the Confederate States. The United States, or the Union, rejected their secession, then considered it illegitimate. However, on April 12, 1861, Confederate troops attacked Fort Sumter, starting the Civil War. During the Civil War, the Emancipation Proclamation was issued, essentially freeing slaves in the Confederacy under the Federal Union. After 4 years and 700,000 lives lost, the war came to an end with a Union victory, and 3.5 million enslaved Americans were freed. Mostly. Suck on that, John Green. I'm kidding, I love you. Hello, civil rights activist Frederick Douglass.
Hello, future person. It's been over 150 years since black Americans became free Americans. Have we achieved full racial equality in America yet?
So let's talk war strategy. Also, yes, I did change clothes because it's cold and I'm a weenie.
Weenie Hut Juniors!
So anyway, during the war, the South implemented commerce raiders, and surprisingly enough, these raided commerce ships that were headed towards the Union in an attempt to cut off their supply line. The Union also had this in the form of a blockade plan that was the inspiration for a Nicki Minaj song. The most successful of these commerce raiders was the CSS Alabama, which during its 2-year run boarded nearly 450 vessels, captured or burned 65 Union merchant ships, and took over 2,000 prisoners captive, all without killing a single person. But we're not here to talk about the Alabama, or its admittedly catchy sea shanty. We are here to talk about its slightly smaller sister ship, the CSS Florida. Now, the Florida was also a commerce raider. It was built in Britain and was commissioned on August 17, 1862. It was slightly less successful than the Alabama, only capturing 37 ships in its run, but it was enough to get the Union's attention. In fact, the Alabama and the Florida were both so well renowned by the Union that they sent a specialized flying squadron of 7 ships down to the West Indies to go capture them. They set sail on September 8, 1863, and after over a year of searching, on October 4, 1864, the Wachusett, captained by Commander Napoleon Collins, caught sight of the Florida, sailing into harbor in Bahia, Brazil. This is the Bahia Incident. It was the evening of October 4th, 1864. Out of sight of the Florida, the Wachusett let out a small boat and sent her towards the Florida. The Confederates, not knowing who they were, called out asking for the name of the ship that the sailors were from. The Union soldiers responded by saying they were from the HMS Curlew, a British ship, and that answer seemed to satisfy the Confederates, and so they returned to the Wachusett. The next morning, the Wachusett sailed into harbor and anchored itself at the entrance of the bay. The Confederates obviously saw this. So the Florida captain, Charles Morris, decided to have a chat with the provincial president of Bahia, Antonio Joaquim da Silva. Later that day, the Wachusett delivered a letter addressed Captain Morris, Sloop, Florida. The Florida rejected this letter because it was not addressed to the Confederate States ship, essentially not recognizing the Confederate government. Collins then sent another message, but first it got read aloud before it got delivered. In it, Collins challenged Morris to a fight. Morris told the messenger that he would not attack the Union ship, and would leave the harbor once he completed his mission. However, he also stated, "I would neither seek nor avoid a contest with the Wachusett, but should I encounter her outside the Brazilian waters, I would use my utmost endeavors to destroy her." At 3 a.m. on October 7th, the Wachusett weighed anchor and headed for an attack on the Florida. At about a kilometer away, she opened fire, but the bad weather prevented them from making contact, so they ceased fire and moved into the harbor. While the Florida may have heard the cannon fodder, Captain Morris and a good deal of his men were asleep on the shore. Due to the bad weather and also it being night, the Confederate ship didn't spot the Wachusett until they were within close range. The Florida raised her flag and opened fire, not with cannons, but with muskets and pistols. The Wachusett returned fire with their own small arms, while getting into position for the main guns. After a slew of cannonballs hit the Florida starboard, Commander Collins called out, ordering for a surrender. After the Florida didn't respond, Commander Collins ordered a ram right into the Florida. After doing so, the Union soldiers boarded the ship and forced a surrender. They then attached a tow rope and began to pull their hard-earned prize out of the harbor. As they were leaving the harbor, a Brazilian sloop gave chase, but it was quickly outran. So, after the battle, Captain Morris and 75 of his men were left stranded in Brazil. Don't worry, they got picked up eventually, but Captain Morris actually served as a foreign agent of the Confederacy for the remainder of the war. As for Commander Collins, he was court-martialed, and this was due to the fact that even though Brazil let Confederate ships dock and resupply in their ports, they were still technically neutral, and they were pissed that the battle took place within their harbor. So they put pressure on the US to have Commander Collins removed from duty. This never happened, and he was actually promoted after the war, mostly due to this battle. Brazil also demanded that the Florida be returned to the Confederates that were left there. The US agreed to this, but the Florida mysteriously sank in a transportation accident. Very convenient.
Three, two, one.
Alright, so I'm going to vastly change gears just a bit. We're still talking about Brazil and the Confederacy, but we're going to talk about the lasting legacy the Confederacy has left in Brazil. And hopefully my cats won't be assholes throughout this entire filming session, because I didn't really think of this when I thought of, hey, let's just film out on the table. Because my cats are assholes. So, after the war, many Confederates were a bit unhappy, to say the least, as to how Reconstruction was going. So, thousands of them fled to Latin American countries. Mexico and Cuba were prime destinations, but the most enticing offer came from Brazil. You see, the Emperor of Brazil, Dom Pedro II, saw the economic success that the United States had with their cotton industry, and he wanted to replicate that. He offered things like subsidized travel, cheap land, and tax breaks to help encourage immigration. All in all, about 10,000 Confederates made their way down south to Brazil, or souther to Brazil, and they established various colonies around the country. Most of them failed miserably, noting that the land was a bit too harsh to cultivate cotton, but the one colony that did succeed was William H. Norris's colony, located in the Sao Paulo region. And at its peak, it saw about 3,500 Confederates call it home. These Confederates, now called Confederados, brought with them some new farming techniques, and then they built some churches and some schools. And over time, they started speaking Portuguese, and some married locals, and they pretty much assimilated themselves. The colony grew into the modern-day city of Americana, and it's almost indistinguishable from the rest of Brazil. I say almost because that's where the pictures I showed in the beginning came from. There's a lot of controversy that follows the Confederate flag, and for good reason. Firstly, this flag isn't actually the flag of the Confederacy. It's this one. This flag became popular because it was a battle flag used by generals such as Robert E. Lee and Joseph E. Johnston. They used it as a way of memorializing fallen Confederate troops, although it often carried this ulterior motive of promoting the Lost Cause agenda, which I'm not going to go into a debate about the Lost Cause today. If you feel like debating that with someone, go speak to Otten Shea Films. It doesn't exist. The flag eventually did grow into this symbol of Southern heritage, even though it had a huge Lost Cause agenda attached to it. It was even used by servicemen in the 1940s to distinguish themselves from soldiers from other parts of the country. However, in the late 1940s and 50s and 60s, with the fall of Jim Crow and the rise of civil rights, also rose a lot of anti-civil rights groups. Groups like the Dixiecrats and the KKK used the flag as a way of showing rebellion against the government and rebellion against civil rights, which is just white supremacy. And this is where the biggest caveat comes in when talking about the Confederados in Brazil, because the flag never really attained any of that context. There's a lot of controversy wrapped up around the Confederados, and to be honest with you, I don't quite know what to think. The issue's not very black and white. Leave a comment as to what you think in the description. Anyway, thank you for watching. Okay, I know we're a few days late. I am sorry. My mouse broke, and the clicker doesn't work. But I have another mouse, so I plugged that mouse in, and the scroll wheel's broken, so it's like almost constantly scrolling. So I've had to use both mice to finish editing this video, and it's been a very frustrating process. So thank you for bearing with me. The next video will be out on time, I hope. I'm gonna get a new mouse. You wanna go to Goodwill today? She doesn't want to go to Goodwill today, and that's fair. Thank you for watching. I'm gonna go get a beer.